Pong, and I'm going to break down the Alyssa Lou situation in a very, I think, provocative way because she was the national champion when she was 13 years old, repeated the next year as a national champion, and probably would have repeated another year, but COVID happened and things were a little bit weird. And she had a growth spurt, and so she was a national champion at 13, national champion at 14, 15, COVID happens. And then now she's 20 and an Olympic gold medalist. And the story, the narrative that the media is pushing is that she retired at the top of her game. And after 2 years, she came back for the joy of it. And it's that joy that led her to being a world champion and an Olympic champion. Not the fact that for the first, for the decade before that, her retirement at 15, 16, she was did everything her dad told her to do. So the lesson should be, if you're going to retire, if you're going to give up, do it after your second national championship. Also, after your second national championship, don't get hooked on drugs and don't let your diet go to trash. And then you could take a year or so off, and then it'll take you a year or so to get back. After you find life outside of winning national championships is boring, it'll take you a year or so to get back, and then you'll win an Olympic gold. Okay? So don't let the liberal media tell you that she won gold by following her heart. She won gold by doing exactly what her dad told her to do for a decade. And her dad controlling every little aspect of her life. That's how you become a national champion at 13, and then do it again at the next year. And then you could take some time off. That is a way to go. Actually, Mortimer Adler, who wrote, an underrated thinker who wrote Reforming Education, argued that should pretty much be the model of American education. It should be rigorous and classical up until about 15, and then you should have to get a job. And then after you get a job, you decide what you want to go back to school or not. I actually think that's a pretty good model. You need a serious, rigorous, and classical education up to 15, and then 15, 16, and then ask them then force them to get a job. And then once they find out jobs suck, they'll be more eager to go back to college and be excited about their education, or they'll find their way that way. I think that's actually a decent model. And that's pretty much the model that created Alyssa Lou. It's not the pierced teeth or the two-toned hair that created her national championship. It's the doing exactly what her dad told her to do for 10 years. And then it turns out you can take 2 years off, come back bigger, stronger, and win an Olympic gold and a world championship. But don't get it confused, and don't let the media turn your 8-year-old daughters into disaffected people who follow their heart, because they won't win. It only matters if you win after the second national championship. Then you could take some time off. And I tell my kids this with music. My daughter can quit violin after she finishes book 10 of the Suzuki series. After book 10, then we can reevaluate. Same with my the daughter's a cellist. Yeah, she doesn't. She doesn't have to. She doesn't have to become a professional cellist. I don't need them to become professional. I don't want them to necessarily become professional musicians. But they can quit after book 10. My son on piano, he can quit after. But I suspect what'll happen is after they attain that kind of excellence, they'll quit and then realize that life is a little bit duller without that kind of excellence, and they'll come back, which is the way the Lord intended. But now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Alyssa Lou's messy dad, right? So her dad comes from China. He gets kicked out because of organizing Tiananmen Square protests, flees to the United States, 25. It's 1988. Gets an MBA, goes to law school, becomes an immigration lawyer, gets rich, turns 40 in 2008, decides, I want kids. So he goes to the marketplace, picks up 5 kids through surrogacy, 2 different surrogates. He buys 5 eggs, spreads them over 2 different white women, just kind of picks them, which is, I guess, a hack over the Bay Area dating scene. If you're an Asian male, I don't know. If you're a rich Asian guy and you just don't want to deal with women, you can just but you want kids, you can just buy them off of surrogates. And I have a problem with surrogacy because I think, one, children have a right to have a relationship with their biological mother. I think that goes to the point of gross that we don't recognize that, and that any sort of adoption surrogacy should always be seen as the second best option. And two, I'm not sure that you could actually be a surrogate without doing it for financial compulsion. Like I'm just not sure that you would go, like anyone would go through that. Any reasonable person would go through that if it weren't for the sake of financial, like if it weren't a matter of financial distress. Right. So it's circumstances that force that to be a viable market solution. So like the two reasons I'm not a huge fan of surrogacy in general. And I think the liberal left is a little bit overly casual, both about adoption and surrogacy as situations, as opposed to like just building better families as a matter of policy and concern. So this guy picks up 5 kids, picks up 2 little white women for genetic diversity. He buys them. He buys their eggs, gets them to carry their baby. So he ends up with 5 kids. Alyssa's the oldest. There's a younger sister and then a pair of triplets. He realizes Alyssa is pretty good at figure skating. So he goes whole hog in figure skating. But the problem is, if you go whole hog and everything, you can't also take care of the other 4 kids. So he picks up a wife, Chinese wife. I don't know the situation of this Chinese wife. I don't know if she's he picked her up from China and brought her here, or he picked her up here, but they end up divorced. So but it sounds like he just needs someone to take care of all of the other kids while he is shepherding and appropriately managing every aspect of Alyssa's life. Because Alyssa's the oldest. And so so you have your 8-year-old who you spend all your time and energy with, but you also have a 6 and then a triplet 4-year-olds you have to deal with. And that's more than one man can do. So he picked up a wife, and then he brought his grandmother in because he's an immigration lawyer, and you can do those kind of things when you're an immigration lawyer. You have those kind of skills. So he brings over the grandma. So now it's the dad, 5 kids, a wife he picked up to raise the kids, and then the grandma he brought in for reinforcements. And he spends all of his time with Alyssa managing her career, because that's a whole job. And then he's got to make money as an immigration lawyer too. So that's the situation. Now, like I said, I'm against surrogacy for a few different reasons. Mostly, for the big two is I think children have a right to their biological relationship with their parents. So the idea that it's just a business transaction is, I think, degrading in a few different ways. Also, I think no woman would do that if not for financial compulsion. So we're just taking advantage. We're taking advantage of a degradation in the market. It's like worse than selling organs. You're selling a whole kid. You're a whole kid. And so I think it's just a gross family, and it doesn't become less gross in a peculiar American way, because I'm not sure that other countries would allow you to just kind of do this, just buy up women's eggs and then as a matter of course, because you just don't want to deal with dating women, and I don't want someone else to have to tell me how to raise my child, so I'm just gonna buy their egg from them so I don't have to listen to them on how to raise this child. That's something that is very American. It just usually have it from women who get babies off of guys and then ditch the guys and throw the guys out of their life. Now, this is what it looks like on the other side. And I think it's gross in both ways, because children have a right to access to both their parents. And I think it's good to have parents be a check on each other, unless it's a form of tyranny. But I'm not saying it's not efficient if you want to produce Olympic champions. Obviously, it can be effective. But I think it's a kind of hack that we shouldn't normalize at all in terms of parenting. So you got to take the good with the bad. Like even Richard Williams, a parent I actually respect with what he did with Venus and Serena, with what he did, had to lop off a whole family he left out in the South to start them fresh. He rounded them off like an error. He had 2 or 3 kids before Venus and Serena that he just had to just ignore. just kind of throw away those kids and start fresh with Venus and Serena, which I think is a messy, unfortunate aspect of Americanism, which doesn't necessarily mean he was a bad father to Venus and Serena, but it does mean that he like was a bad father, because like you can't just write off your children like to the other children. So like American families are messy, but I don't think we should embrace this better families by capitalism. I just buy someone else's eggs so I don't have to deal with the mother of my children and then expect that to be fine. And then we don't know what's going to go on with the mental health of the other 5 children who suspect probably don't resent Alyssa at all, but they did not get the same love, because 5 children is a lot to give that kind of love to if you're also making money. So he spent all of his time with Alyssa and then, farmed the other 4 off on other people, which is not great, I think, for the mental health of anyone involved. Now, I'm sure there are regular Asian, high-performing Bay Area kids. However, I don't think this is the model of parenthood and family, American family, that we should uphold. If you don't know, I suspect one of the reasons we're so involved in the Ukraine situation is that was a hotbed of getting white babies. If you want white eggs and fertility treatments, Ukraine was where you went to. Kiev was like the Silicon Valley of giving away white eggs. And that's a Kiev. And that's, I suspect, one of the reasons we're so involved in the Ukraine, because there's a place where that could happen. And it's not to say that Lou couldn't have gotten an Asian baby. He could have gotten an Asian baby. I know, in the Bay Area, I know many a white lesbian couple who came back with an Asian baby, came back with a Chinese baby. But Lou didn't want that. Arthur Lou did not want that. He wanted his own seed with the baby of his choosing, and he chose these white women for genetic diversity. But I just think it's all just a dubious practice, selling eggs on the market. It doesn't tarnish the gold medal, but it also, I want to give also the lie to the story that people are talking about Alyssa Lou in terms of she won a gold medal just because of her love of skating. That love of skating was cultivated. That love of skating was cultivated by an expertise in skating and a realization that the rest of the non-skating world is relatively boring as opposed to those highs. So when you say that, she skates effortlessly. Yeah, well, she already banked the effort, right? She was doing triple combinations when she was 13 and 14 years old. So yeah, she's not scared of doing them at 20 because she's been doing them for that long. Like, she knows this game, and she knows her body, and she knows her strength. And it just shouldn't be that surprising that someone who knew the game so well at 13 and 14 is also comfortable in the game at 20 when she's just stronger. And that's one thing I noticed when I saw her. She just looks strong, like physically strong. Like, so she had all the skill and just the strength that the other participants didn't have. And then also, like, she's been doing it for a while, so she had the beauty and the aesthetic aspects, like, all put together very well. But that is the product of a decade worth of serious, no-nonsense training and doing what you're told and trusting the process. And the process is your dad, which means trusting your dad. And then, after your second national championship, you can go ahead and take a year off. Take 2, why not? As long as you don't let your diet go to crap and you don't let your friends get you on drug, take 2 years scrolling TikTok and then coming back when you realize that that's boring, and you then win, right? So then win again, because she was winning before. She was like, before her retirement, she was winning. So what you learn is that you might be able to take a year or so off without giving it up. But we learned that with Nathan Adrian, right? Nathan Adrian's a swimmer in a not similar position, but hilarious a hilarious position. Not hilarious, similar position. But yeah, he came back because he was well schooled when he was young, right? So rigorous classical education when you're young. Then you can take your rumba springer or whatever it is when the Amish go off for a few years and then come back. And it turns out that you will not, unless you pick up drugs, degrade yourself too much and your habits will carry you. The beginning is more than half the whole, as Aristotle said. And Alyssa Lou had a good beginning, had the right beginning. And you should judge her by her beginning and the end, not by the little break she took in the middle. All right. So thank you for your time. And if you appreciate what I'm saying, because nobody's going to put this together with the indictment of surrogacy and the amused appreciation of Alyssa Lou's family and the narrative around her success like I am. So if you appreciate what I'm doing, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, and I'll keep doing it, letting you know. Because your kids need to listen to their dad if they want to be anything. They could stop listening to their dad like after 15, after their second national championship. That's when you're allowed to stop listening to your dad. But until you get that second national championship, shut up and listen to your dad and do what your dad says. And that should be the message for all the people at home. That is the message that I stand by. And don't let the media tell you different. Hold on, I'm going to just check one thing, and then I'm going to let you go. I want to make sure that everything is working and you can hear me very well. Those on the live stream and in the chat. Make sure my people in the chat can do very well. All right, so that is the story of Alyssa. I feel maybe someone in the chat can explain to me how surrogacy is not as bad as I think it is, but I think it's, gotta understand, I'm not a huge fan of adoption either. But I think we're just underestimating. We're just underestimating the damage we do and the casualness of that culture. But I think we underestimate the casualness of gambling culture too. I'm not a fan of Kalshi or DraftKings. I don't think that I'm not a fan of American culture in that way. I believe it's anti-families, it's anti-nation, it's anti the people. Yeah. But it's the analog of women for decades, just like getting rid of their guys, getting rid of the children's father. It's the analog of that. When men do it, it looks a little bit different because they got to buy an egg from somewhere. When women do it, it's what it looks like. All right. Thank you for your time. I will talk to you at another one. Peace.